Imagine for a second, right, that you are standing in the middle of the Amazon rainforest.
Okay.
And surrounding you is just this unfathomable explosion of life. We are talking about something in the neighborhood of 80,000 different documented species of plants.
That is just a staggering amount of biodiversity.
Right. Now, here is your task for the day. You need to find exactly 2 distinct plants out of those 80,000.
Just 2.
Just 2. And not just find them. You have to figure out that when you combine them and boil them together for hours in a very specific way, they create a powerful chemical reaction that fundamentally alters human consciousness.
Yeah.
If you're just guessing, right? If you're just wandering around picking leaves and tossing them in a pot, what do you think the odds are of figuring that out by pure trial and error?
Astronomically low.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you were to run the numbers, it is practically a statistical impossibility. You would have a better chance of winning the lottery while simultaneously being struck by lightning. And yet, for you listening right now, this isn't some hypothetical thought experiment.
No, it actually happened.
Exactly. This botanical miracle was actually discovered, perfected, and utilized by indigenous peoples in the Amazon millennia ago. It's a reality that completely upends our conventional textbook understanding of how human beings acquire knowledge.
Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are unpacking this exact mystery. We have some incredibly fascinating source material today.
We really do.
We are looking at excerpts from anthropologist Jeremy Narby's book, The Cosmic Serpent, DNA and the Origins of Knowledge. Our mission today is to explore the massive, almost unbridgeable gap between Western scientific assumptions and indigenous Amazonian wisdom.
And just a quick note for you as we get started, our goal today isn't to take sides on the politics of land rights or the global pharmaceutical industry.
Right. We're just here to unpack Narby's fascinating arguments, report on his findings, and lay out the sheer biological mystery he presents. So, let's set the scene a bit. Take us back to 1985. Who is Jeremy Narby at this point?
So in 1985, Jeremy Narby is a 25-year-old anthropologist. He is fresh out of Stanford University, armed with all the, academic rigor you would expect, and he heads deep into the Peruvian Amazon.
The Sapichis Valley, right.
Exactly, to study the Ashaninca people. Now, his original goal was actually highly practical. During the early 1980s, international development agencies were pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into what they called the development of the Peruvian Amazon.
But how were those agencies defining development back then? What did that actually look like on the ground?
Well, in practice, according to Narby's research, this often meant confiscating indigenous territories.
Wow.
Yeah. The land was then handed over to market-oriented individuals or corporations whose standard practice was to basically clear-cut the jungle and turn it into cow pastures.
Just destroying it.
Completely.
Yeah.
The prevailing attitude among the international experts at the time was that the indigenous people simply didn't know how to use their own lands rationally or economically. So Narby went in wanting to prove the exact opposite.
He wanted to defend them.
Right. He wanted to conduct a rigorous economic and cultural analysis to show that the Ashaninka were actually masters of rational, sustainable resource management. His hope was that providing hard empirical data would help these communities legally protect their lands from being seized.
So he goes into the jungle wanting to write this very grounded, very academic defense of their farming and forestry techniques, but he almost immediately runs into a massive wall.
A huge wall.
He's talking to the Ashaninka, trying to document their agriculture, and he looks at their gardens. And to a Westerner, these gardens look like complete chaos. But Narby realizes they're actually these incredible polycultural masterpieces.
Yeah, they have up to 70 different plant species grown together in a brilliantly balanced ecosystem.
70. Naturally, he asks them how they learned all this. Where does this level of botanical mastery come from?
And their answer is not what a Stanford anthropologist wants to hear.
Not at all.
They don't say, oh, through centuries of careful trial and error, or our ancestors conducted controlled agricultural experiments. No. They continually credit their immense knowledge to their ayahuasca grows, their shamans, and to the hallucinogenic plant brews they drink.
Which, for Narby, is a total disaster for his thesis.
Oh, complete disaster. Remember, his entire project relied on proving their rational scientific nature to international bankers and development agencies. Narby felt that emphasizing that their ecological knowledge came from drug-induced hallucinations would completely undermine his credibility and his main argument.
It's the ultimate collision of worldviews.
Yeah.
He's asking for spreadsheets and data points, and they're talking about visions and spirits.
Exactly.
Which leads to a really pivotal moment. Narby is having a conversation with an Ashaninca man named Ruperto Gomez. Narby is expressing his astonishment at their knowledge, and Ruperto just looks at him and says, "To understand what interests you, you must drink ayahuasca."
It's an invitation.
An initiation, almost. Ruperto goes on to tell him that some people say it is a cult, which is true, but it is not evil. He says, and I love this quote, "In truth, ayahuasca is the television of the forest. You can see images and learn things."
The television of the forest.
Yeah.
I want you to just sit with that analogy for a second. It completely reframes how we typically view a hallucinogenic experience.
Hey, totally.
In Western culture, hallucinations are usually viewed as an escape from reality, or a distortion of it. But Ruperto is describing it as a broadcast of reality. It's an educational tool, a channel you tune into to receive actual, actionable information.
Imagine you're Narby in this situation. You've spent your whole life in Western academia, and against all your conditioning, you accept the invitation. Ruperto tells him to eat a strict diet beforehand, avoiding salt and fat.
Which Narby mostly ignores, right?
Yeah, he ignores it because he secretly thinks it's just local superstition. So when the night comes, Ruperto prepares the space. He sprays perfumed water, blows tobacco smoke to clear the area, and starts whistling this strikingly beautiful melody in the dark.
Setting the stage.
Right. Then Narby drinks the ayahuasca. He notes it tastes like extremely bitter, acrid grapefruit juice. And within 30 seconds, the nausea hits him like a freight train.
It's really important to understand this isn't a gentle, euphoric introduction. The sensory overload Narby describes is absolutely terrifying.
Terrifying doesn't even begin to cover it.
Yeah.
He is plunged into these incredibly deep, vivid hallucinations. He suddenly finds himself surrounded by two gigantic fluorescent boa constrictors. He estimates they are 50 feet long.
50 feet.
And here is where his Stanford education completely fails him. These glowing snakes start speaking to him without words. They start explaining to him that he is just a human being. They point out the staggering, bottomless arrogance of his academic presuppositions.
Wow.
He realizes he had been walking around the jungle with the distinct impression that he understood everything, and suddenly he is confronted by a reality that is vastly more powerful, one he didn't even suspect existed.
It is a total, brutal dismantling of the ego. The academic observer, who believes he is studying his subjects from a superior objective vantage point, is suddenly reduced to weeping.
Literally weeping.
Yeah, Narby writes extensively about feeling profound humility, essentially begging these giant glowing snakes for forgiveness for his arrogance. And physically, it is a grueling ordeal. He starts vomiting violently. Which brings up a fascinating linguistic point for you to consider. The Ashaninca word for ayahuasca is kamarampi.
Kamarampi?
Yes. And that word literally derives from their verb to vomit. The purging isn't an accidental side effect. It is a core, expected part of the cleansing experience.
While his eyes are closed, he describes seeing the insides of his own body glowing a bright electric red like blood. When he opens his eyes, trying desperately to escape the visions, he sees an Ashaninca woman standing in the dark.
But not just standing there.
No, to him she is bathed in a glowing light and appears to be levitating above the ground. He's absolutely staggered by the fact that the people around him are completely familiar with this terrifying, overwhelming reality, a reality that had just turned his entire universe upside down in the span of an hour.
The aftermath of this night is crucial for Narby's journey. His entire academic framework was shattered. That safe scientific distance he tried to maintain as a researcher completely collapsed.
He couldn't hold on to it anymore.
No. He realized that reality was vastly more complex than his scientific training allowed him to believe. He couldn't just brush off the shaman's claims as a tall story anymore. He had experienced the broadcast on the television of the forest himself.
Let's shift gears and look at the actual science behind that brew, because hearing about that level of biological mastery is wild. If I understand the source material correctly, the fact that ayahuasca even exists is a scientific marvel. How does it actually work?
Let's break down the brilliant chemistry of it. As we mentioned at the start, making ayahuasca requires boiling two very specific plants together. The first plant, typically a bush called Psychotria viridis, contains a powerful hallucinogenic substance called dimethyltryptamine, or DMT.
Which is pretty famous now.
Very much so. Interestingly enough, DMT is also secreted naturally in small amounts by the human brain. But here is the massive catch. DMT is completely useless as a hallucinogen when you swallow it.
Oh.
The human digestive tract contains a specific stomach enzyme called monoamine oxidase, or MAO.
Okay, MAO.
This enzyme acts like a bouncer at a club. It immediately breaks down the DMT before it can ever enter your bloodstream and reach your brain.
Wait, so if my stomach destroys the DMT immediately, how does drinking a tea made from these leaves do anything? You could eat those leaves all day and nothing would happen.
Precisely. Nothing would happen. And that is where the second plant comes in. The second plant is a specific vine called Banisteriopsis caapi. This vine doesn't contain DMT. Instead, it contains specific substances that act as MAO inhibitors. These chemicals specifically target and block that exact stomach enzyme. By disabling the enzyme, it allows the DMT from the first plant to survive the digestive process, enter the bloodstream, and reach the brain, triggering the profound visions Narby experienced.
Think about what that means for a second. It means that someone, somewhere, figured out an incredibly complex molecular lock-and-key mechanism without ever having seen a molecule.
It's incredible.
Richard Evans Schultes, who is widely considered the most renowned ethnobotanist of the 20th century, looked at this specific combination and stated that pure experimentation is highly unlikely. How do people without electron microscopes, without knowledge of modern chemistry or physiology, stumble upon the exact solution to activate an alkaloid using a monoamine oxidase inhibitor?
And when you ask the indigenous people how they figured it out, they don't claim to be biochemical geniuses who spent decades cross-referencing alkaloid interactions. They give a very simple, direct answer. The plants themselves taught us.
Hearing that just makes the West's reaction to it so much more frustrating. How did modern anthropology handle that answer? I imagine it didn't fit neatly into their textbooks.
They utterly failed to handle it. Narby identifies this as anthropology's major blind spot over the course of the 20th century. Instead of actually listening to what indigenous people were saying, anthropologists just projected their own contemporary academic trends onto the shamans.
It reads like a timeline of academic hubris. In the early 20th century, modern psychology and psychiatry were really taking off in the West. So anthropologists looked at shamans and dismissed them entirely as mentally ill.
Right, labeled them as schizophrenic,
neurotic, or epileptic. They basically claimed that because shamans saw visions, they were just suffering from severe mental derangement.
But then the academic fashion changes. In the mid-20th century, you have the era of Claude Lévi-Strauss.
Let me pause you there for anyone who didn't major in anthropology. Who is Lévi-Strauss and what was his angle?
Claude Lévi-Strauss was a massively influential French anthropologist. During his era, the prevailing academic thought shifted. Suddenly, indigenous peoples weren't viewed as crazy. They were just misunderstood through a Western lens.
An upgrade, sort of.
Sort of. Lévi-Strauss essentially rebranded the shaman as a sort of indigenous psychoanalyst. The new theory was that the shaman was a creator of order. The idea was that the shaman took the chaotic, arbitrary pains and fears of a sick person and transformed them into an ordered, intelligible form that the community could understand.
Okay, so they went from being called schizophrenics to being called primitive therapists. But then the academic trend flips again. In the 1980s, you hit the era of post-structuralism.
Right.
For those who aren't familiar, post-structuralism was a movement obsessed with questioning traditional systems, rejecting absolute truths, and tearing down established order. And guess what happened to the shaman?
They changed again.
Suddenly, anthropologists decided shamans were actually creators of disorder. They were now viewed as subversive figures who continually undermined systems and boundaries.
The profound irony of this entire timeline is staggering. Anthropologists spent 100 years obsessively studying the techniques of the shamans, the drumming, the singing, the social dynamics of the rituals. But they outright refused to believe the core truth of what the shamans were actually saying.
They couldn't accept the literal message.
No, they treated the idea that plants possess intelligence and can communicate as impossible. Because in the Western rationalist worldview, plants do not talk. Therefore, the anthropologists concluded they had to interpret what the shamans really meant, treating their literal explanations as poetic metaphors or cultural myths.
Which is exactly the trap Narby was trying to avoid falling into. After his terrifying ayahuasca experience, he started taking his main consultant, an Ashaninca man named Carlos Perez Shuma, much more seriously.
A critical shift.
Carlos was a tabaquero ayahuasquero, and Carlos patiently explains the hierarchy of the plants to Narby. He says ayahuasca is the mother of tobacco, and the mother of ayahuasca is a snake.
Carlos offers Narby a brilliant conceptual framework to understand how they communicate with the spirit world. In their language, the spirits are called the maninkari, which literally translates to those who are hidden.
Carlos's explanation here might be my favorite part of the source material. He uses a radio analogy. He tells Narby, look, souls and spirits are everywhere. They are like radio waves flying around in the air all around us right now.
That's such a modern way to explain it.
It is. You can't see them with your bare eyes, but they are there. But if you turn on a radio, suddenly you can hear those invisible waves. He explains that ayahuasca and tobacco act exactly like turning on that radio. They are the technology that allows a human being to tune in to nature's hidden frequencies.
You ingest the plants, and suddenly the invisible becomes visible.
Exactly. You can hear the music of the spirits, you can learn their songs, and you can access their knowledge.
It's a highly sophisticated way of looking at the world. They aren't worshiping the plants as literal gods in the sky. They are using the plants as a biological technology. It's a communication device to access a deeper layer of reality. And what is most striking is that this communication is incredibly practical.
It's meant to be used.
Right. The Ashaninca believe that nature actively provides visual signs to guide them to the right medicines.
Yes, the jurgen plant is the perfect example of this. The jurgen snake is a deadly pit viper, a fer de lance native to the Amazon. Carlos and another local man show Narby a specific plant they use to cure the bite of that exact snake.
And what does the plant look like?
Narby looks closely at the plant, and it has these distinct white hooks on it that look exactly like snake fangs. Now, to Narby's Western scientific mind, this initially seemed like mere coincidence. He assumed it was just what anthropologists call animist superstition, the idea that primitive people project meaningful patterns onto nature where none actually exist.
Exactly. Western science would firmly state that any correspondence between the shape of the plant's hooks and the snake's fangs is purely accidental. It firmly rejects the idea that a common intelligence is lurking behind both the plant and the snake, communicating to humans through visual symbols.
Yeah.
But for the Ashaninca, the empirical results are undeniable. They use the plant with the fang-like hooks, and it successfully cures the venomous bite.
And Narby actually gets his own undeniable physical proof of this empirical knowledge. Think about the last time you had a stubborn pain that nothing seemed to fix. Narby had been suffering from chronic back pain since his teens from playing too much tennis.
Which is notoriously hard to treat.
Right. He had seen European doctors, he'd had cortisone injections, heat treatments, nothing worked. An Ashaninca man notices his pain and offers to cure him using a tea made from a plant called Seno. But he gives Narby a very specific and frankly bizarre set of warnings.
Very specific.
He tells him he must drink it at the new moon, that it will make his body feel freezing cold, that his limbs will turn rubbery for 2 days, and that he will see hallucinations.
Which, again, sounds to a Westerner like mystical nonsense. How is a cup of herbal tea taken during a specific lunar phase going to cure a structural chronic back issue that modern European medicine couldn't fix?
But Narby trusts them at this point, and he drinks it. And exactly what the man predicted happens, down to the minute. 20 minutes later, he's hit by a wave of freezing cold. He breaks out in profuse cold sweats to the point where he is wringing out his shirt multiple times.
Intense physical reaction.
Yeah. After 6 hours, he completely loses motor control. He says he couldn't walk a few feet without falling down. He experiences visions of a column of multicolored light across the sky. This total lack of coordination, this rubbery feeling, lasts exactly 48 hours.
But the crucial part of this story is what happens on the third day.
On the third day, he wakes up and the back pain is gone. Permanently. He writes in the book that the pain never returned. He experienced firsthand that there's seemingly fanciful explanations like drinking a tea at the new moon will turn your body to rubber and cure your back were not metaphors. They were, in practice, literal biochemical truths.
This physical healing brings us to a critical pivot in Narby's journey, and it highlights the real-world stakes of everything we are discussing today. This knowledge isn't just an anthropological curiosity to be debated in university halls. It has massive global implications.
Absolutely.
After his fieldwork, Narby leaves the jungle and spends 4 years in Switzerland working for an organization raising funds. His goal was to help indigenous groups in Peru legally title their land. And he's successful. He helps them legally secure 1.5 million acres of land.
Which is an incredible, tangible outcome from his research. But he runs into a serious ethical dilemma while doing this, right?
He does. During this time, he was constantly giving talks to European funders and international organizations, explaining the ecological brilliance of indigenous agriculture to get that funding. Yet, he intentionally hid the hallucinatory origins of their knowledge.
You left that part out.
He admits in his writings that he was afraid. He knew that if he told European foundations that the Ashaninca learned their advanced botany from 50-foot telepathic snakes, he wouldn't be taken seriously. and the vital funding for the land titles would dry up.
That fear of judgment perfectly highlights the double standard that becomes so glaringly obvious at the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. Around this time, the industrial and political worlds are really waking up to the economic potential of the Amazon.
Big money.
Biotechnology is taking off as an industry, and global corporations realize that the tropical forests represent fabulous, unexploited pharmaceutical wealth.
But here is the logistical nightmare for those corporations. Without the botanical knowledge of the indigenous people to guide them, pharmaceutical companies would just be blindly testing the estimated 250,000 plant species in the world. And the statistics regarding indigenous contributions are staggering.
Let's hear it.
Consider this fact. According to the research cited by Narby, 74% of the modern pharmacopoeia's plant-based remedies, meaning the official collections of recognized drugs and medicines, were originally discovered by traditional societies.
74%. That is a staggering reliance on indigenous knowledge. And Narby points to the story of curare as the ultimate example of this extraction. What is curare exactly?
Curare is an Amazonian substance traditionally used by indigenous hunters as a blowgun poison. Its mechanism is brilliant. It paralyzes the muscles of tree-borne animals, causing them to relax their grip and fall from the forest canopy, but it doesn't actually poison the meat, making it safe to eat.
Wow.
For millennia, indigenous hunters knew exactly how to formulate this highly complex muscle relaxant from specific vines.
Then, in the 1940s, Western scientists get their hands on it. They study it and realize that this exact property, the ability to interrupt nerve impulses and relax all muscles, including the breathing muscles, is the missing key to modern surgery.
Total game changer.
Before this, facilitating major surgery of the torso and vital organs was incredibly difficult because abdominal muscles would naturally tense up. Curare relaxed everything. It literally revolutionized Western medicine. Chemists analyzed it, synthesized derivatives, and turned it into a massive global industry.
And Narby highlights this dynamic as a profound injustice from the perspective of the indigenous people. Western pharmaceutical companies rush into the Amazon, sample these indigenous plant remedies, return to their high-tech laboratories, synthesize the active ingredients, and then patent them as their own intellectual property.
Taking all the credit.
Narby reports that they claim the discovery for themselves, often entirely ignoring and failing to compensate the indigenous societies that spent thousands of years discovering and refining these precise chemical combinations.
Narby views it as a staggering hypocrisy. In his view, Western corporations take the recipe, make billions off the patent, and then turn around and dismiss the indigenous people when they say the spirits of the forest gave them the recipe in the first place. They want the cure, but they aggressively reject the worldview that produced the cure.
It forces anyone reading Narby's work to confront the limitations of our own scientific paradigm. We demand that indigenous knowledge fit neatly into our materialist, rationalist boxes. If it doesn't, we discard the explanation as primitive superstition. Yet, as Narby points out, their superstition has fueled the better part of our modern medical breakthroughs.
Okay, let's take a breath and synthesize the journey we've been on today. We started with a massive math problem about 80,000 plants. We traveled into the deep Amazon, faced terrifying, glowing snakes that forced a Stanford anthropologist to vomit up his own academic arrogance.
Quite the trip.
Literally. We uncovered the biochemical miracle of ayahuasca and the stubborn blind spot of Western academics who refused to just listen to what the shamans were saying. We saw how the radio waves of the jungle cured chronic pain, and we ended up confronting Narby's views on the global pharmaceutical industry.
It is a profound clash of worldviews. On one side, you have an indigenous worldview that actively listens to the forest, treating nature as an intelligent, communicating entity. On the other side, you have a Western worldview that insists on being a detached observer, often refusing to accept any form of knowledge acquisition that doesn't fit its preconceived materialist framework.
It really makes you rethink what it means to be educated, doesn't it? But before we wrap up this deep dive, I know you have one final thread to pull from the source material, something for everyone listening to chew on long after we're done.
I do. I want you to consider the title of the book we've been exploring, The Cosmic Serpent, DNA and the Origins of Knowledge. Throughout his time with the Ashaninca and in studying shamanic cultures globally, Narby kept encountering the exact same imagery.
The snakes.
Yes. The shamans continually described their visions as featuring two intertwined glowing serpents. They say these serpents are the masters of life, that they hold the blueprint of all living things, and that it is these serpents that transmit molecular-level botanical recipes to them.
Intertwined serpents that hold the blueprint of life.
Yes. Now, I want you to picture the central discovery of modern molecular biology. If you look at an image of a twisting double-helix DNA molecule, it looks exactly like two intertwined serpents.
Oh, wow.
It is the literal blueprint of life, present in every living cell, plant, animal, and human. So here is the provocative thought Narby leaves us to mull over. Is it possible that the shamans aren't just speaking in poetic metaphors? Is it possible that through these profoundly altered states of consciousness, aided by the chemical keys of the forest, the indigenous shamans are actually, literally communicating with the DNA inside their own selves?
Now that is something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, and we'll catch you next time.